Hi, this is Elon Paz, founder of Dust and Grooves. You're listening to Your Morning Coffee Podcast with my friends Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart. Weekly music news for the new music business.
From the Wall Street Journal, Bob Lefsetz, the man who was so mean to Taylor Swift.
From Forbes, AI's impact on music in 2025, licensing, creativity, and industry survival.
And from the LA Times, 20 essential music documentaries to stream right now. Oh boy, do we
love our
documentaries. Well, I have a winter cold, so my voice is not exactly up to snuff, so I will apologize in advance. But nevertheless, Jay and I are so stoked to be here in the new year, in 2025. So let's get the show going right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air. 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 On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Jay, so good to see you on
Good to see you.
2025.
I like the Barry White.
Number.
It's sort of a you'll never find.
It's very it's Barry
That was
White
Bill
with no
Withers, but-
soul. That's right.
Yeah.
No, that was. Oh,
Was
no,
that Barry
was.
White?
No, that you'll never find was Lou Rawls.
Lou
You'll
Rawls,
never
boy,
find.
oh boy, pulling that one out. I
Well, by
like
the
it.
way,
I like
Jay-
the deep voice.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. That intro was from our friend Elon Paz, author of the stunning coffee table book Dust and Grooves: Adventures in Record Collecting. Ooh,
Oh
what a
man,
book.
it is such a great coffee table book. If you love collecting records, you gotta get Dust and Grooves. By the way, his much anticipated Dust and Grooves Volume 2, Further Adventures in Record Collecting, that's finally available to order now, and it's there's a limited first edition of 4,000 copies.
Oh, well, and you and I, kind of like you said, if you really like records and things like that, it's really common that you just also jump into cool and collectible books, which we are both huge fans of. For Volume 2, by the way, Paz highlights the planet's biggest proponents of vinyl collecting, bridging stunning images with extensive interviews, revealing the motives, I should say, and backstories behind the global vinyl community.
Yeah, picture this. It's like this beautiful coffee table book full of these amazing photographs of just people and their record collections, and some of them pull out some of their favorites. It is one of the most joyful coffee table books I've ever had. I own both of these books, and I display them proudly in my living room. So visit dustandgrooves.com/shop. That's dustandgrooves.com. /shop, and use the promo code YMC10 and you'll get a 10% discount on your book.
Well, and if you're a fan of the vinyl, you will love the book. So do check that out. In the news this week, Jay, a bunch of different stories, including Spotify showed porn in search results for some popular artists. This is from Wes Davis over at The Verge. A Reddit user posted a screenshot of a Spotify search that brought a surprise. A pornographic video tucked into suggested results from the rapper MIA.
Oh my gosh. So Spotify representative Laura Beatty told The Verge in an email that the examples The Verge provided, quote, have been removed due to violation of our policies, end quote. Those policies include forbidding sexually explicit material. We asked Spotify for more information on how the videos made it past its moderation, and we'll update you when they respond.
You might not hear anything, Jay. I'm just saying. Not surprisingly, the TikTok saga continues. The Supreme Court agrees to hear TikTok challenge to the U.S. ban. It's by Mandy DeLaDugue over at Music Business Worldwide. On December 16th, lawyers for TikTok filed an emergency motion to the U.S. Supreme Court for a temporary pause to the law. TikTok's legal team invoked the First Amendment, arguing that Congress has enacted a massive and unprecedented speech restriction by targeting the app via the introduction of the law.
More TikTok news. We'll see how this goes. The Supreme Court agreed to hear the case just 2 days after TikTok filed its appeal. The court consolidated TikTok's case with a related challenge from app users and allocated 2 hours for oral arguments. The central question before the court is whether the law violates First Amendment protections.
Right. And so the Supreme Court announced December 18th that it will hear TikTok's emergency appeal challenging a federal law that could effectively ban the social media app in the U.S. by January 19th of 2025. The court scheduled oral arguments for January 10th, just over a week before the law is set to take effect.
Right, that's next week. We'll let you know how it goes. Other items in the news that we found interesting this week, music stocks continue their losing streak the final week of 2024. That was a headline by Glenn Peoples, our friend over at Billboard. In a week with little news, typically around New Year's and Christmas and Hanukkah and the holidays, there's very little music news that breaks. But in a week with little news and few regulatory filings, music stocks finished the last full week of 2024 by dropping for the third consecutive week.
Right. 2 of the 3 major music labels were among the week's few winners, actually. Universal Music Group gained 1.4%, while Warner Music Group improved to 0.9%. Elsewhere, iHeartMedia rose 1.1%. So gaining, but not by a ton.
No, but, those are gains. And the independent music companies, they all posted declines, unfortunately. Reservoir Media dropped 4.3%. Believe fell 4%. All 4 South Korean companies that we've been talking about, they lost ground too. YG Entertainment dropped 2.6%. Hybe, they fell 2.5%. JYP Entertainment lost 2%. And SM Entertainment slipped 1.6%.
Right. But Spotify, Billboard Global Music Index's most valuable company, dropped 0.8%, the third consecutive week the stock has fallen, while the stock has dropped 9.9% since reaching its all-time high on December 4th. Spotify is by far the best performing music stock of 2024. It has seen a 143% increase this year, with 2 trading days remaining. Pretty big numbers.
Yeah.
And by the way, to see more in Glenn's free weekly Billboard newsletter, The Ledger, and we do not miss an issue of that. So,
never. It's the best.
A good thing to do in 2025 is to make sure you subscribe to that. It is free, and it is pretty darn cool. So before we get to the stories, actually, Jay, how about a big thanks to our sponsors? Boy, we certainly appreciate it as we head into the new year.
Let's thank the Mechanical Licensing Collective. The MLC is a nonprofit organization that's making a big difference for songwriters, music publishers, and other rights holders by transforming how they receive mechanical streaming royalties from services like Spotify, Apple Music in the United States. Every month, the MLC collects the streaming data and royalties from those platforms, matches the money to the creator who has earned it, and then pays them or their publishers and admin partners the royalties that they're due. To date, the MLC has already distributed $2.5 billion in total royalties and has nearly 50,000 members worldwide. So if you're a songwriter, composer, lyricist, or, with music streaming, or a publisher, admin, you need to become a member of the MLC to ensure that you're not leaving any money on the table. Best of all, membership is completely free, and the MLC pays out 100% of the royalties it receives. Visit the MLC.com to learn more.
Indeed. We are also sponsored in part by Soundtrack Music for Business. The good news is that 33% of consumers discover new music they hear played in businesses such as restaurants, retail establishments, bars, and hotels. The bad news? Well, over 70% of U.S. small and mid-sized businesses are misusing music, resulting in a loss to music creators, rights holders, and the music industry to the tune of over $1.3 billion per year in the U.S. alone. Soundtrack is the leading music streaming service for business, providing music to more than 80,000 businesses globally. To learn more, go over to soundtrackyourbrand.com/artist-guide.
Yeah, and we'd like to shout out to Music.ai. Music.ai is a trailblazing AI-powered music and audio platform offering an expansive suite of over 50 stackable AI audio solutions. You want to change the tempo or pitch of your song, adjust instruments or vocals, mute background noise. Music.ai makes all of that super easy. It's embraced by record labels, agencies, tech firms, and developers. Music.ai is synonymous with audio innovation. With over 45 million users, their tools process over 2 million minutes of audio every single day. They can process yours today. Visit music.ai to get started.
Yeah, and oh boy, they have some amazing stuff.
Yeah, they do.
Oh my gosh. And by the way, every week I get to hang out as we are heading into our 5th year with my good friend Jay Gilbert. He is a music industry consultant, curator of the weekly Your Morning Coffee newsletter, and a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, and Warner Music Groups, and in the midst of a cleansing, a purging of his stuff at the moment.
Yeah, decluttering, going through the attic, getting rid of stuff. Yeah, it feels good.
It's a good feeling.
I get to do this show every week with my good friend Mike Etchart, longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, Warner Music, Capital EMI, and Universal Music Group. And before we hit record, we talked for about an hour just about all the stuff that's going on, and it's always the highlight of my week. And one of our favorite pieces this week was the lead story in the Your Morning Coffee newsletter, and it was from Matthew Hennessy over at the Wall Street Journal. And in case you missed it, the headline was "Bob Lefsetz, the man who was quote unquote so mean to Taylor Swift." And Matthew starts the piece out by saying that his newsletter isn't always nice, but it's chewed over by everyone who matters in the music industry.
Well, that means we matter, Jay, because if you subscribe to the Lefsetz letter, the email bulletin from music business guru Bob Lefsetz, you will find yourself waiting impatiently, as I do, so says the author, for its irregular arrival in your inbox. The newsletter has no publication schedule. It simply shows up, often late at night. Sometimes you get nothing for a week. Sometimes 3 emails come in a single day. Keep up with it, and you'll know everything worth knowing about the multi-billion-dollar record and concert industry. Every edition is chewed over by the people who matter in the dream factories of Hollywood's Sunset Boulevard and Nashville's Music Row.
Yeah, it sure is. Mr. Lefsetz, 71 years old, isn't the only writer interested in the sweet spot where art and business meet. But few bring such curmudgeonly glee to the task. It's fair to say that he isn't for everyone. He's loud. He's the kind of guy who orders the most expensive thing on the menu when someone else is paying. Prickliness is his calling card. His stream of consciousness writing style cribs from the new journalism popularized by Tom Wolfe, Hunter S. Thompson, and the celebrated rock writers of the 60s and 70s. His unedited epistles arrive full of jaggedly insights and contrarian riffs. Wow, that's easy for you to say.
He goes on to say that style of journalism isn't so new anymore, and Mr. Lefsetz doesn't have the raw talent of, let's say, Lester Bangs or the literary aspirations of Nick Tosches, but he got several things that every writer needs to be successful. A genuine love of his subject, the energy to crank out a seemingly infinity of words, and an eager readership. That's us for sure.
Yeah.
He also has the instincts of an entrepreneur. He says, I was at a hamburger joint on Pico Boulevard in LA, and I'm reading Billboard. This is Bob talking. It was bad. I'm reading and I go, this is terrible. I could do a better job than this. He says this is May of '86, and that's when the Lefsetz letter was born.
Yeah, Bob Lefsetz won't say exactly how many subscribers his newsletter has, only that he's reaching six figures every time I hit send, he says. As I learn when we meet for lunch at a ritzy hotel in Beverly Hills, he talks like he writes in short bursts of trenchant analysis held loosely together with digressions on history, culture, politics, Spotify, electric cars, and his obsession with coffee-flavored yogurt. What was meant to be a 2-hour conversation turned into a 4-hour monologue about everything from Morgan Wallen, the biggest act in America today, far bigger than Taylor Swift, he says, to my colleague, columnist Holman Jenkins. Bob says, I've got to ask, what's he like in real life? Mr. Lefsetz pauses only to swallow his Wagyu beef or to pop a cough drop.
It sounds like our lunches. The subject of Miss Swift, he volunteers between bites, is dangerous for him. The pop superstar essentially admitted to 60 Minutes in 2012 that she wrote her smash hit Mean, and the refrain asks why you gotta be so mean about Mr. Lefsetz. He called her wobbly performance at the 2010 Grammys dreadful and worried that she was too young and dumb to realize how badly it would damage her career. In one flail swoop, Taylor Swift consigned herself to the dustbin of teen phenoms who we expect to burn brightly and then fade away, Bob said back in the day.
Ouch. Taylor Swift was only 21 at the time, an industry naif, trying to make the leap from country radio to mainstream pop. Then, as now, Mr. Lefsetz was an industry giant who spoke directly to executives, songwriters, producers, and tastemakers. His criticism landed on the young artist hard. Quote, the things that were said about me by this dude just floored me and leveled me, Taylor Swift said, and she confessed that to CBS's Leslie Stahl.
Now, some might say subsequent history has proved this dude wrong, but he won't cop to it. Bob said, if you read the newspaper, if you read the news, Taylor Swift is the biggest act that ever happened, he says. I guarantee you, if we went through this restaurant, I'd be stunned if we could find one person who could name 2 songs from the new album. We don't canvass the dining room, the writer says, but I follow the current music scene more closely than most people in their early 50s. I also have 3 daughters. Yet try as I might, I can't come up with the name of a single song off Miss Swift's new album. Never mind 2. Honestly, I can't even summon the name of the album. And in parentheses, he says, oh yeah, it's Tortured Poets Department. Oh yeah, right.
Mr. Lefsetz's point is that the music business isn't what it used to be. The glory days are gone. The internet has dismantled the common culture. Streaming has dispersed the audience and the revenue. Bob says anyone who tells you that the business is the same as it ever was, 100% false. Everything is segmented, disconnected, smaller. He says, when I was growing up, you had top 40 radio. The ubiquity of that format instituted a common musical vocabulary. I can sing every lick of Hello Dolly. I can sing every lick of Strangers in the Night. Kids had to listen to that stuff even when they were waiting for the Beatles to come on. These days, no one has to listen to anything they don't want to. So what is Taylor Swift selling?
They go on to say, not since Adele's 2011 breakthrough Rolling in the Deep, he says, has an artist been able to reach everybody with a song. Is that because we live in a Tower of Babel society, or that because we don't have the right record? Both. He says, we lived through a renaissance in the 60s and 70s. They had one renaissance in painting and sculpture. They've been painting and sculpting a lot of great shit since then, but there was only one renaissance. We never had another Bob Dylan.
Right. The search hasn't necessarily been called off, though. The financial allure of a new renaissance in popular music remains strong. He says, what we have now is a business akin to the late 50s and early 60s when you had Bobby Rydell and Fabian, prepackaged label creations that kept the teeny boppers buying records, but brought little that was new or interesting in the way of artistry. Fabian didn't move the needle like the Beatles or Bob Dylan would do a few years later. Quote, can something come from left field? Absolutely, Mr. Lefsetz says, but it hasn't happened yet.
So for the needle to move, he says you had to find someone talented, believable, who takes a different path. We've been looking for that in all walks of life. Okay, so what do we have now? We have Elon Musk. One thing we know about Elon Musk, he's doing it in however the F he wants, good, bad, or otherwise. That's what the musicians used to do. Musicians don't do that anymore, he says.
Right. He writes that Mr. Lefsetz obviously holds Miss Swift's talents as a songwriter and record maker in low regard. That's his right. She isn't for everyone, just as the Lefsetz letter could be considered an acquired taste, yet the recording studio isn't the only place for talent to prove its mettle or profitability. Mr. Lefsetz allows that Miss Swift's instincts as a performer and as a businesswoman are top-notch. Her recently completed 21-month Eras tour grossed more than $2 billion. He says, you've got to give her credit for that, looking like he really means it. She went out with the greatest hit show and said to her fans, I'm going to give you everything you want. And it worked. Boy, did it ever.
He sure did. He said the swirl of money that Ms. Swift stirs up on tour impresses Mr. Lefsetz, but he isn't driven to make money himself. The bits of biographical information that he drops during our conversations suggest that he's never been great at holding down a job in what he calls the straight world. He earned the law degree in the 1980s, but never figured out how to put it to use. Bob said the 90s were an unbelievable disaster. I remember having $17 in my checking account and writing a bad check for the rent. Before the advent of email, he mailed hard copies of his newsletter to movers and shakers. It was years before it took off. The lean times made an impression on him. He said, if you don't have any money, that's all you can think about.
With his pop collar and worn jeans, Mr. Lefsetz gives the impression of an aging ski bum. It seems likely he could make a fortune off his newsletter, but he doesn't charge for it. I ask him point blank why he does all this. Why start all these fights? Why mix it up so personally with brand name artists and powerful executives? If it isn't for the money, then what's the motivation? Power and influence, he offers bluntly. Okay. Does he have that? Look, Mr. Lefsetz says, if you're doing it for the money, there's always going to be some money. Whereas if I write about anybody in the world, they read it. I know they're going to read it. That's 2/3 of it. The other third is just the raw resonance of writing something.
He does it for the love of the game. How rock and roll is that? We haven't had that spirit here since 1969. Or not much of it anyway. So Bob says, let me tell you a story. I was at the House of Blues in LA the night it opened in 1994. He says, I'm upstairs with Steven Tyler, of course, the lead singer of Aerosmith. I'm talking to him. The security guy comes up and says, hey, you got to break it up. You got to move on. Other people want to talk to Steven. So Tyler turns to the security guard. He goes, this is the most important person here. I'm going to talk to him as long as I want. And it's like, that won't pay you $1, okay? But what the F more can you ask for?
That's right. And then just finally, he says that Mr. Lefsetz is just like the crazy temperamental artist he writes about. He understands the business they're in because he speaks their language, knows their desperation. He's possessed, of the same irrational drive for creative control, the punk rock spirit that drives Elon Musk, drives Bob Lefsetz too. He's constantly searching for the sweet spot where artistic freedom connects with an audience out on the open road. He's a little rough around the edges. Miss Swift is probably right. He doesn't have to be so mean. He could have taken a different path. Maybe he'd have made a little bit more money if he were nicer, like Fabian or Bobby Rydell. But then someone else would have gotten all the power and influence. What fun would that have been? Fantastic piece on Bob Lefsetz by Matthew Hennessy from the Wall Street Journal. He's a deputy editorial features editor. We really enjoyed reading that and seeing that get out there because we read Lefsetz's newsletter and we listen to his podcast.
And have forever, by the way.
Yeah. And look, whether you agree with it or not, it's insightful and it's entertaining. And it's just the highlight of my week sometimes, reading some of that stuff. And again, whether you agree with it or not, but I would venture to guess that if you did disagree with something, a take that he has, that he'd be more than happy to sit down and tell you where you're wrong.
I bet that is correct. He is a bit of a nudge, as they would say, but darn, very entertaining, very entertaining. All right, Jay, our next story is from Virginie Berger over at Forbes. AI's impact on music in 2025, licensing, creativity, and industry survival. The music industry is entering a critical phase where technology could either amplify its value or decimate its foundations. The disruptive effects of AI, coupled with industry inertia, have already set the stage for seismic shifts in the coming months. The industry is facing a technological reckoning as AI models grow more sophisticated and political landscapes shift in ways that could either protect creators or dismantle their livelihoods further. The question is no longer if AI will disrupt the music industry, but how much damage will it do, and can we contain it? Here's what lies ahead and what must change.
Right. The first thing she points out is the rise of AI as a copyright thief. Generative AI models are now creating songs indistinguishable from human compositions. These models are trained on vast, unlicensed data sets scraped from the internet and music platforms. This practice allegedly violates copyrights of millions of artists, yet accountability remains murky. Courts are just beginning to grapple with the implications of AI-generated works, leaving creators vulnerable. Existing copyright laws are ill-equipped to handle ownership disputes when machines compose songs using fragments of thousands of existing works. The economic fallout of this legal gap is profound. Platforms like Spotify increasingly integrate AI-generated music to cut costs, further shrinking royalty streams for human artists. Why license a costly catalog when AI can generate something quote-unquote good enough for free?
So the UK is currently at the forefront of AI copyright reform. Policymakers are debating whether to allow sweeping permissions for AI models to train on creative works without licensing. This has alarmed artist advocacy groups who fear such policies could set a dangerous global precedent. If the UK adopts these measures, the EU, US, and other regions may follow, opening the floodgates for unlicensed generative AI tools. Artists must act now to pressure lawmakers for stricter frameworks, such as opt-in licensing models that prioritize creative rights over tech industry interests.
Right. Virginia goes on to write that by mid-2025, AI companies could operate with near impunity, churning out music based on unlicensed data sets. The stakes have never been higher for artists to mobilize and influence these policies. The next point she makes is that platforms as silent AI adopters. So platforms like Spotify and YouTube are already quietly incorporating AI to popular playlists and to suggest music. By 2025, expect AI-generated content to flood these platforms, often disguised as human-created. This practice erodes listener trust and devalues genuine artistry. Streaming platforms stand to save billions of dollars by replacing licensed music with AI-generated alternatives. Without mandatory transparency, audiences may unknowingly consume music that's entirely machine-made, blurring the lines between authentic artistry and corporate efficiency.
Well, she goes on to say transparency is key. Platforms must be compelled to disclose when content is AI generated. Otherwise, both artists and audiences will remain complicit in a system that cannibalizes creativity for profit. The next point, the AI frontier model revolution. The rise of frontier AI models, less computationally expensive and requiring smaller data sets, poses an even greater threat. By late 2025, even small startups and individual developers will release music generation tools that rival professional studios. This accessibility will flood platforms with AI-generated music, further marginalizing human creators. The saturation of machine-made tracks will make it nearly impossible for independent artists to compete, forcing platforms to prioritize machine-made content for cost efficiency, exacerbating inequalities and diminishing visibility for authentic artists.
Yeah, this is scary and it's spot on. I got a note from a publicist this week and she sent me several albums that were on Spotify that were entirely created with AI, but it wasn't, they weren't saying that they were. Right. And I think she points out here that that's a danger. The next sub-headline is really important. She says, AI agents and the death of the musician. AI-powered agents are poised to become major players by 2025. An AI agent is a software-driven system capable of performing complex tasks, that's easy for you to say, autonomously, such as writing, producing, and marketing music. But their application extends far beyond. Some discussions have also emerged about major labels experimenting with AI-generated performers, but large-scale adoption remains speculative. These AI entities, if developed, could require no royalties, creative freedom, or time off, potentially creating competition for human artists. This creates impossible competition for human artists.
Scary indeed. She says, will fans care if their favorite artist is an algorithm? Evidence suggests that many won't, as long as the music resonates. With advancements in neural AI, machines may soon be able to understand and dissect human feelings, recreating them in song with startling accuracy. This raises existential questions about authenticity, the unique role of human emotion in art, and whether such emotional mimicry will resonate in the same way as genuine human creativity.
She writes, what can be done to protect the industry? The music industry has less than 12 months to act decisively. Advocacy for global copyright reform is paramount. Artists must push for international agreements requiring explicit consent for AI training data sets and demand transparency for AI-generated works. Licensing agreements need to specify clear terms, including upfront fees for dataset usage, royalties for derivative works, and auditing mechanisms to ensure compliance. Additionally, educating fans about the consequences of unchecked AI use in music is really critical. Fans must understand how their choices impact the creative economy and the risks of devaluing human artistry. Building coalitions among artists, rights organizations, and policymakers, that'll be essential to demand fair treatment and ensure royalties for any AI-generated content derived from their work. This approach not only protects artists' rights, but also lays the groundwork for enforceable and sustainable framework for AI creators and platforms.
She says, while artists have long embraced technology as part of their creative process, using AI for creativity alone will not prevent platforms from replacing them or AI systems from infringing on their copyrights. The focus must shift to robust licensing frameworks and enforcement mechanisms that protect artistic works from authorized use and ensure fair compensation. Additionally, fan education campaigns should emphasize the risks of unchecked AI proliferation in eroding the creative economy.
Right. She talks about the growing AI patent landscape. The rapid expansion of generative AI is evident in patent filings. According to WIPO last patent landscape report on generative AI, between 2014 and 2023, over 54,000 generative AI-related inventions were patented. That's amazing. With 25% of these patented in 2023 alone. Speech and music account for a significant portion of these patents. That's like 13,480 of them, highlighting how deeply AI is embedding itself in the music field. Tencent leads the list of applicants with over 2,000 patents, followed by companies like Baidu, IBM, and Microsoft. China dominates the landscape, accounting for 38,000 copyrights, while the U.S. trails with over 6,000.
The global race to dominate AI technology is accelerating, and policy decisions will shape this landscape. A new Trump administration could bring deregulation across tech industries, weakening copyright protections and prioritizing innovation over creator rights. This scenario could embolden companies in the U.S. to adopt aggressive AI deployment strategies impacting international norms. If unchecked, this deregulation risks marginalizing artists even further and intensifying the challenges posed by AI-driven music content. Advocacy for stricter licensing and transparent AI training protocols is more urgent than ever.
Right. This explosion in intellectual property filings underscores how rapidly AI is growing, particularly in the video and music sectors. As generative AI reshapes these fields, the stakes for creators have never been higher. And one of the final things that she touches on is this thing called a call to action. She says that the clock is ticking. The next 12 months will determine whether the music industry thrives or collapses under the weight of AI. Best case scenario, governments align to regulate AI training data sets and platforms adopt ethical practices, allowing human creativity to coexist with AI tools. Artists leverage AI to amplify, not replace, their voices. Worst case scenario, a deregulated tech-first landscape emerges where AI dominates streaming, leaving most artists with neither income nor recognition.
Authenticity becomes a niche commodity, accessible only to a privileged few. Without intervention, 2025 could mark the beginning of the end for independent artistry. AI-generated content will saturate the market, leaving most artists unable to compete for either visibility or income. Artists, fans, and policymakers must rally to create a sustainable, ethical future where technology amplifies creativity instead of erasing it. The fight for the soul of music has begun, she says, and it's a battle we cannot afford to lose.
Yeah, this is something you and I talk about nearly every week. This is really well done, really well written.
Very well done.
Virginie Berger currently serves as the Chief Business Development and Rights Officer at Matchtune. That's an AI-powered music copyright infringement detection tool. Virginie Berger, great piece. We appreciate it.
Yes, and we should try to get her on for a special. This is a fascinating discussion, and we talked about this at the end of last year. It's like when we talk about the most critical and important stories of this year, this is it, man. This is really it.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I will reach out to her. You and I are planning in a special episode coming up near the end of the month, and it's sort of like our vinyl roundtable that we did with some really great vinyl experts. We're going to do the same with AI, and we're having an AI roundtable, and it's in the works right now. We're just locking down the date. We've got the guests, and it is world class, and we're really, really looking forward to this. So stay tuned for that.
Yes. Well, Jay, let's start. Let's make sure we thank the rest of our sponsors, because, again, we've got a wonderful team behind us, and without them, we could not do it, including Bandzoogle. Built by musicians for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform that makes it easy to build a stunning website and online store for your music in minutes. All the features you need are already built in, including dozens of fully customizable templates, tools to sell your music and merch, commission-free crowdfunding and fan subscription features, mailing list tools to grow your fan list, integrations with Bandcamp, SoundCloud, YouTube, Bands in Town, and more, so you can easily add content from your other online profiles, and live support from their musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Website plans start at just $8.29 a month, which includes hosting and your own free custom domain name. Your Morning Coffee podcast listeners can go over to bandzoogle.com, try it free for 30 days, and use the promo code Morning Coffee, all one word, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code Morning Coffee.
Yeah, and a special shout out to our very first sponsor, Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are really changing how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. Edited daily by founder Bruce Houghton with help from Alana Bonilla, Hypebot and sister blog Music Think Tank are published by live music discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town.
And yes, Bands in Town. Over 90 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It's the #1 artist service platform, connecting over 650,000 artists with their super fans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates across all platforms. Huge thanks We certainly appreciate it. And Jay, how about our last story? Oh, something that we love to talk about and seem to talk about every time we get together.
Yeah.
This is from Meredith Blake and Robert Lloyd over at the LA Times. 20 essential music documentaries to stream right now.
Oh my gosh.
And oh my goodness. Yes.
I saw this and I couldn't wait to send it to you because you and I have seen a bunch of these and some of them we haven't seen. And like you said, I mean, we're such huge fans of documentaries in general, but especially music-related documentaries. And I'll watch a documentary on an artist that I may not even be a fan of. I watched this one on Selena Gomez, and nothing against Selena Gomez. It's just I'm not a huge fan of her music. I don't listen to it. It's not bad or anything. It's just not my thing. But I love the documentary. I love seeing how she handles touring and writing and recording and how she deals with, people in the press that maybe are rude or whatever it is. I'm always on the lookout for great documentaries, and I know you are too.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
They talk about 20 essential music documentaries that you can stream right now. So these are documentaries that, if you look at this article in the LA Times, you can stream these documentaries right now. And again, some of these we've seen and talked about, some of them we have not. I'll kick it off for the first one. This was from 1959, Jazz on a Summer's Day. In the piece, they write, would I call this memento of the 1958 Newport Jazz Festival the best of all concert films? I would.
Well, there you go. And by the way, talking about the problem with all these documentaries and anything, of course, in this day and age is that licensing deals expire. So maybe it was on Netflix when you saw it. It may not be there anymore. So it is kind of sometimes hard to keep up with where they are. The next one they mentioned, What Happened, Miss Simone. That was a 2015 documentary. They say Liz Garbus's journey through the life and career of singer-pianist Nina Simone. And I saw that one, and it is fascinating and very good.
Awesome. I got to see that one. The next one is Don't Look Back from 1967. This documentary captures Bob Dylan's 1965 tour of England. It's also the source of that famous cue card video of Subterranean Homesick Blues that everybody knows.
Oh, yeah. Then from 2017, The Long Strange Trip, depending on how you feel about their music and the culture that surrounds it, a 6-part, 4-hour docuseries on the Grateful Dead will seem not a minute too short or 4 hours too long. And I would say I am not a big Grateful Dead fan, but I loved that documentary. I thought it was freaking great.
See, that's the thing about documentaries, that you don't necessarily have to be a big fan. And sometimes it's good to see how the sausage is made, and it makes you appreciate that artist. The next one was really good. This is from 2021, and I believe we talked about it at the time. And that is this Todd Haynes documentary about the Velvet Underground. And their influence is still felt half a century after almost nobody bought their records. Mostly resolves the problem of how to make a movie about a musical group who is, in its relatively short career, left almost no film record.
Yeah, not a lot of stuff to put in the documentary. The next one they mentioned is Zappa from 2020. They say if the Velvet Underground had to contend with limited source material, Zappa director Alex Winter enjoyed an open door to the vault of a man who recorded everything, filmed much, and apparently kept it all. And that was a really good one as well. And again, I'm not a Zappa fan. I'm more of a fan of the artist of Zappa, just because he did so much on his own and just really paved his own path. Sure. But again, another great documentary.
A true original, highly influential. The next one of the best on this list. If you haven't seen it, make sure you see this documentary. It's called 20 Feet from Stardom. And that was in 2013. Morgan Neville's Oscar-winning film honors the backup singers, mostly women of color, who added soul to the recordings and glamour to the stage shows, both black and white, from the 1960s on. Really good.
Yeah, this one I'd never heard of, and boy, I'm going to go looking for it. It was from 1978, called Always for Pleasure, Les Blank's swan dive into the gumbo that is New Orleans. Musicians heard from include Professor Longhair, Alan Toussaint, the Neville Brothers, and the Wild Tuchapulas. And if you're not a fan of New Orleans music, what is the matter with you? Because so much of everything we know came from New Orleans, and I am going to dive into that one when I get a chance.
Yeah, a swan dive into the gumbo that is New
Yes,
Orleans.
indeed.
The next one, the Decline of Western Civilization from 1981. Fantastic documentary. It's sort of black musical comedy about loud, fast bohemianism, performative rebellion, and lost youth. That's easy for you to say. Arranged around performances by X, The Bags, Black Flag, Fear, and many others. Fantastic documentary.
Really good one. And then there was, of course, two others that followed it, which were both
One was
also
on
great.
Hair metal, right? There was like a
Yes, it was.
the Hollywood
Yeah.
scene. I think that might have
Oh, they were
been
great.
Decline of Western Civilization Part 2.
Part 2, I think it was.
Yeah,
Yes.
really good.
Yeah, for sure. And then from 2008, Patti Smith, Dream of Life. And this is one, again, I didn't catch. From the mid-1990s to mid-2000s, professional photographer Steven Sebring followed the poet, singer, punk, I can't even say that word, progenitor across time and space, then rearranged the pieces into an impressionistic, I should say, collage. And now I will take the marbles out of my mouth, Jay.
Progenitor. What the heck? I got to Google that. The next one we talked about when it came out a few years ago is Summer of Soul. And if you haven't seen Summer of Soul, I mean, just the quality of the film and the audio, and you got Stevie Wonder, and you've got, I mean, it's crazy the talent that they, and this was uncovered. Great documentaries can make you look at something familiar in a new light, but they can also reclaim history that has long been forgotten or was intentionally erased. That's what happened when Amir Questlove Thompson made this joyous Oscar-winning film about the Harlem Cultural Festival, a series of concerts held over the turbulent summer of 1969 at Mount Morris Park, that's now Marcus Garvey Park, in Harlem. Unlike Woodstock, which took place a few hours up the road that same summer and has been endlessly memorialized since, the Harlem Cultural Festival faded into obscurity. And I'm telling you, if you only watch one documentary on this list, watch this documentary. It is stunning.
And I've literally watched it 3 times.
Yeah.
It's that good.
Yeah.
It's so good. The next one they mention is from 2021, Tina. Tina sheds powerful light on the singer who was born Annie Mae Bullock before adopting a stage name selected by Ike Turner, with whom she began performing as an insecure teenager. But the Tina Turner documentary is so great. And man, I learned so much about her. And what a great one.
And that abusive relationship. The next one we just talked about recently on the podcast, and that's Yacht Rock, a doc, D-O-C-K, a documentary. See what I did there? A series of videos spoofing the mellow rock stars of the 70s and early 80s spawned Yacht Rock. The series generated a renewed appreciation for the slickly produced sounds of artists like Steely Dan, Michael McDonald, Toto, whose paths crossed in the LA music scene in the pre-MTV era. What a fun documentary that was.
Indeed. The next one from 2020, the Bee Gees, How Can You Mend a Broken Heart? And boy, I saw this one. It is fantastic. The colossal success of the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack, of course, meant that the Bee Gees became synonymous with disco. But as this documentary makes clear, there was much more to the brothers Gibb, who were too versatile and talented to be confined to a single genre. And this one, of course, featured our mutual friend, Albie Galutin, who produced some of their records and was on a lot of those sessions. And we used to just kind of bug him about stories from that era. But it's a good one. It's a great documentary.
We sure did. And it was so great seeing him in that documentary. And you and I saw him in the flesh at Music Tectonics this year.
We did.
Such a great guy. The next one, again, a recent one that we talked about called The Greatest Night in Pop. So if you grew up in the 1980s, you probably heard We Are the World hundreds of times on the radio and knew the charity single released in 1985 was created to raise funds for famine relief in Ethiopia. But chances are you gave much less thought to the massive logistical effort that went into corralling dozens of music legends with their colossal egos and equally voluminous hair into a Los Angeles studio to record the song. And I'll tell you, the moment that just gave me chills is when Michael Jackson was just in there testing a mic, and they were recording, they were rolling tape, and he was just standing there no effects, no band, no anything. And he just sang a few lines and you went, wow, that guy was unbelievable.
Well, and it also showed the genius of Quincy Jones. Who of course, we lost at the end of last year. And great documentary. This next one I have not seen yet. I know of it, but I haven't managed to watch it yet. It's from 2023, Milli Vanilli. Before they became an international punchline, Milli Vanilli was one of the biggest pop acts of the late 1980s and early 1990s. But as the world eventually learned, they didn't sing a single note on their multi-platinum debut album, Girl, You Know It's True. In a scheme devised by German producer Frank Farian, they lip-synced to music recorded by others, less telegenic artists.
Yeah.
And I can hardly wait to get that one too.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one either.
Yeah.
And for our audience that doesn't know, they got their Grammy taken away from them when all that came to light. It was a big scandal. The next one I haven't seen, but I really want to. It's called Nothing Compares. And that's from 2022. And it's about Sinead O'Connor. You know, you'll remember that back in October of 1992, she tore up a picture of the Pope on Saturday Night Live, effectively destroying her mainstream pop career with a single act of protest against the Catholic Church. She was a celebrity who was brutally canceled for speaking the truth and was one of many high-profile women vilified as quote-unquote crazy in the 1990s and 2000s. I got chills. I want to see that one.
Well, and we lost her last year as well.
That's right.
It was last year, yeah. The other one, another 2015 documentary from called Kurt Cobain, Montage of Heck. Director Brett Morgan spent years sifting through Kurt Cobain's personal archives to make this film, which he presents as a layered, startlingly intimate portrait of the late Nirvana frontman. Using artwork, journal entries, audio recordings, and Super 8 footage of a toe-headed Cobain playing a toy guitar, Montage of Heck shows how the singer channeled childhood anguish, especially the upheaval caused by his parents' divorce, into his music.
Yeah, and then there's only a couple more. The next one is Dear Mama, the saga of Afeni and Tupac Shakur, and that's from 2023. This is a 5-part docuseries, and it stands out in a crowded sea of musical biographies because of the thoughtful way it connects Afeni Shakur's radical political activism to her son's musical legacy. Dear Mama unfolds chronologically, presenting richly detailed portraits of mother and son.
And then the last one they mentioned from 2018, Whitney, directed by Kevin MacDonald, who also made the excellent Marley. And indeed, that was an excellent. This heartbreaking documentary sheds light on the personal demons that tormented Whitney Houston for years before her untimely death by accidental drowning at 48. Hard to believe she was that young at the time.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. But, and as we kind of alluded to, these things often disappear. So if you happen to be strolling Hulu or Netflix or HBO or whatever, and you see a documentary that seems interesting, watch it, because it may disappear if the licensing deal expires, and it may not come back for a while. So I've gone looking for other documentaries that I knew of, and I just couldn't find them because for whatever reason they weren't there anymore.
That is really,
they do go fast.
Really good advice. And again, that was, from the LA Times, 20 essential music documentaries to stream right now. So those are available right now. There's another story next to it in your morning coffee, the newsletter this week, and it's from the Arts Fuse. And the headline was the 10 best music documentaries of 2024, along with others worth watching and a few disappointments. And it has a couple of the documentaries that you and I just talked about, but there's many from 2024 that are also available. So check that out in your morning coffee.
All good stuff. All right, well, we got to wrap up the show. And if you enjoy the show, of course, please tell one friend. Both Jay and I would certainly appreciate it. And without the good work of our good friends over at the MLC, Soundtrack, Bandzoogle, Music.ai, Hypebot, and Bands in Town, we couldn't do the show. So we thank them wholeheartedly every time that we get an opportunity. So big thanks to all of them. And of course, thanks for all of you listening in. On behalf of Jay Gilbert and myself, Mike Etchart, I say thanks, and we'll see you next time on the Your Morning Coffee Podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.